Yeah, boy, it's August 17th, and it's episode 118, and this is a Fantasy Football Auctioneer. I'm your host, Uncle Buckets. The Fantasy Football Auctioneer is the official podcast of the fantasyfootballauction.com, the internet's only website dedicated to fantasy football auctions. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/fantasy football auctioneer, or follow us on Twitter and Instagram. We are at Fantasy Auction. We also have an all-auction Twitter community. Follow us and all types of different auction enthusiasts. The handle there on Twitter is at FF Auction Advice. So connect with auction players from all over the Twitter sphere. We got a great show for you tonight. Tonight we're going to take a look at running backs. It's our running back special. We're looking at strategies, rankings, nomination ideas. We've got Twitter questions. We've got all types of different stuff. So typically this running back one's our number one podcast. So we're pretty pumped to bring it to you tonight. But of course, our experts, they're always here. Well, actually, I got to change it. I said that last week too. We should just be saying, of course, there are only two of us here. But Blister's off on assignment, shall we say, probably hauling in some big Walters. So it's Slim and I tonight. So he's working on the menu for our big auction league. Slim, what's for dinner? 2 weeks? 1 week? 2 weeks.
I don't even know. 2 weeks, yep. Lobster. I'm going to do lobsters.
So that worked? We're bringing them in from Maine all the way to central Canada?
Yeah, apparently. Kind of talking to some middlemen. It seems like it's no big deal. They're ordered anyway, so it's supposed to be there on time. So they ship overnight, apparently. So.
Oh, yeah?
That's what apparently. They'll be live.
They're going to be live coming in too, eh?
Oh, yeah. Oh, not bringing in frozen seafood. Come on. You guys are better than that.
Oh, whoa, that's nice. That's good to hear. It's good to hear. So we've got a ton of stuff tonight. We've got a ton of Twitter questions, so it's going to be good. We're pretty jacked up. I have my Adrian Peterson cup for the running back episode tonight, and then we'll hopefully hear some good feedback from Blister as he comes back in from the center of the mining community. What's that?
It's a good thing the kids aren't home drinking out of
that.
Some rub off on you.
Hayden drinks out of it all the time. I don't think he knows.
Cut me that switch.
Oh, hopefully it's not. Hopefully he doesn't show up for Family Day. This, you know what I mean? They have the Adrian Peterson Cup for Family Day or something. That'd be a little weird, eh?
That would be.
Anyways, let's get this thing rolling, Slim. So if you guys are ready, then I'm ready. Let's cock the hammer. It's time for action. So like I said, we got a good show tonight. Tonight is all running backs. So we'll just get into it. We've got, I think it's a half dozen Twitter questions that just came in hot off the press. So let's get into segment number one. This one's called We Just Got a Letter. So we just got a letter, or I guess a few tweets. Some questions came in on Twitter. On Twitter, it's at Fantasy Auction. And if it's more than 140 characters, you can email us at footballauctioneer@gmail.com. So the first one here comes from Hester1157. His question is this: has zero RB flipped to zero wide receiver? And so that's the first part of the question. Then the second part of the question, Slim, is who are two $40 to $50 running backs that can finish in the top five? So I guess first question, Slim, is has this zero RBs flipped to zero wide receiver?
No, I don't think so. Not even close. I mean, receivers are typically the most reliable. In every draft, mock, real draft that I've done so far, everybody at least gets one of these or tries very, very hard to get one of the guys from the top, 12 to 15. I oftentimes try and get two. So, yeah, I don't think that it's flipped to a zero wide receiver at all. It's still nice to get at least one of those guys. I think most owners prefer that. Now, the second part, who are two running backs that can finish? One for me is CJ Anderson. I'm pretty high on him. I think I have him as my RB6.
RB7 according to today's
7.
rankings.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, and to me, he's a guy who I think can finish in the top 5. He averaged 24 touches a game over the last 8 games of the season last year. I don't expect that to drop off considerably. He's a 3-down running back. He can do it all: pass, protect, catch passes. So I don't see him coming off the field tons. So yeah, I think he's going to have the volume where he can finish top 5. And another guy I like, and we'll get into a little bit later, is Justin Forsett. And obviously he's a little bit more scoring dependent.
Yeah.
If you're in a PPR league, definitely his you can rank him a little bit higher. For my rankings, I always rank as far as PPR because every league I'm in is a PPR league.
Becoming the new standard. Yep.
I feel like it is. It's in some capacity, whether it's 0.5 or 1 point PPR. So he's actually maybe one of the players that it does change a little bit. I know we always talk about that it's not really that big of a deal for a lot of guys, but he's one where you do have to adjust him somewhat in your rankings. So yeah, he's another guy. I think he doesn't really fit that criteria. I think it was asked $40 to $50 running back, wasn't it?
Yeah,
he typically goes for a lot cheaper than that. And like I said, he'll be a guy that we talk about a lot coming up, but he's a guy I think that can finish in the top 5 for sure, especially in PPR leagues.
So right now, CJ Anderson's AAV is 47 and Forsett's is 31. I agree with you on the first point. I don't think it's flipped to 0 wide receiver. I think the beauty of the auction allows you to get both of those. So I definitely think you got a gun for someone near the top when it comes to wide receiver. And then a guy that I like in that 40 to 50 range, AAV's 49. So we'll say it's in that range. I mean, I got to say, even though DeMarco has now been a trader and gone to Philly, even if he drops 60, 70 points from last year in PPR, which is a pretty big drop, he still finishes as a top 5 wide receiver or top 5 running back. So I think that right now you can get him as we have him consensus wise. It's the RB7, which isn't that far out of the top 5, but I definitely think that he's a guy that can jump into that or stay in that top 5, I guess. So just one more name to throw in there.
Just to go back to the beginning of that question, got to thinking, and we've talked about this. I know you and I think we both listened to the same podcast at one point months ago, but I heard John Paulson from 4 for 4 on a podcast. And for me, he's one of the very few guys that I actually really take stock into things that they say and things that they come up with. I mean, we know he's one of the most accurate rankers of players that are out there at the moment. And he brought up a good point where he looked at running back and wide receiver consistency. And if you look at the top tiers of running backs, say the top 12 running backs, after you get out of the top 2 guys, so your Adrian Petersons, your Le'Veon Bells, the chances of them finishing as a top running back the following year is about 50%, which that's a lot of risk if you're going to spend $50 on a guy. And if you look at the wide receiver, I can't remember what the percentages were. They're just much more consistent. The top tier guys are going to finish in that top tier or top tiers or very close to it more consistently than the running backs will, which is why I think you'll never really see a 0 wide receiver strategy, even though they're deep. We still see people
got to land a big guy.
Yeah, we still see people trying to land 1 or 2 of those big guys and then taking their shots with maybe some lottery tickets at running back.
All right, so great segue into the next question. At Neil's 1040, he asks, do you prefer one $50 running back or 2 $20 to $30 running backs? So what do you think, Slim?
Man, you have to pull the splinters out of my ass because I'm going to be right on the fence here. Because this is a question where, I mean, for me, and we'll get into this again a little bit more, I go into a draft with a couple different budgets in front of me because if I say don't get a top running back that I like, maybe there's only a couple, 2, 3 that I actually want in that $50 range. If I don't get one of them, then I'm prepared to go with the $20 and $30 running backs. And I've done both this year, and I like both. I think that you're capable of winning with both. So do I prefer one over the other? I have to say not really. I like the teams typically that I get doing both strategies. Put a gun to my head, I probably would say I like the ones maybe slightly better that have the 2 cheaper running backs. Then I end up with guys like Forsett a lot, Frank Gore a lot, CJ Spiller a lot. I find those guys I gravitate towards because I think they're values. And if you look at our rankings and our AAVs and, our what's the value indicator metric, I think a lot of the times they show that those guys are values based on how I rank, but even how all 3 of us have been ranking our players. So I tend to get a lot of those guys, and they are cheaper. So I would say, I guess, very slightly, I could lean towards the cheaper running backs. But again, I mean, I like getting one of those big name guys and filling in the gaps with some cheaper guys as well.
Well, and for me, I'm going to go to 20 to 30 to answer the question, only because I think if I want to spend big money on a running back, it's going to have to be more than 50. It's going to be closer to 60. And I mean, we saw that somewhere on Twitter. I don't know if we had that conversation one day about the one website I went to where they didn't have anybody over $50. And I just think that anybody who's actually mocking or has done a draft yet, I mean, there's a lot of guys that are going for more than 50. There's guys going for more than 60. I mean, right now we have Adrian Peterson's AAV at $63, Jamal Charles at $62. And I think if I'm going to spend big money on a running back, it's going to have to be up in that neighborhood. And if I can get one of those guys in the 50s, then I'm going to be happy. And that's the way I'm going to roll. But if I can't, then I'm going to go down, I think, to that 20 to 30 range too. Because I mean, I'd love to get Lamar Miller and Forsett, let's say, for $50. I think is a nice little run. So, but I just think you need to spend more than 50. I think 50 is at no man's land in running back.
Well, I was going to say, you get into that range then of DeMarco Murray, LaShawn McCoy, guys that maybe have question marks. And when we talk about 50%, maybe not living up to that top running back status again, there's some names right there that might jump out to some people as guys that might be hard pressed to meet that top ranking again. So like you said, I kind of agree. It is a no man's land. I will say I get CJ Anderson a lot in that area, and I'm high on him. So I don't mind taking him there. Other than Levy and Bell sliding to me in one draft that I recall for $52, I probably haven't gone with that strategy as much as, like you said, the cheaper running back strategy. And again, that's only because I'm not probably going to spend over $60 to get Peterson or even Levy and Bell or Marshawn Lynch or, even high 50s. I'll just wait and I'll spend 40 then.
Right.
And, maybe not go quite as extreme to 20 or 30 for my RB1, but I'll spend 40 on Justin Forsett if I have to. So, because I know that at $31, he's a pretty good value. So, I don't mind spending a little more than that for the guy.
So it kind of ties in again to the next one. It just seemed to be rolling. I don't know if you wrote them down in that way that they'd segue to each other, Slim, but if you did, nice work. At Latex Salesman 7, there's 6 others, or he just likes the number 7. I don't know. That's interesting.
It's a George Costanza reference, so maybe it is number 7.
Well, yeah, maybe. Yeah, I guess that's
Mickey
true.
Mantle.
Right?
Girl's name.
Costanza. Anyways, so at Latex Salesman 7 asks, would you load up on top wide receivers and forego the greater than $40 RBs? And if so, who would you be targeting, and how much of your cap would you devote to those RBs? So it all kind of just flows into what we were just saying, but
sure.
You're loading up. First of all, I guess, would you load up on top wide receivers?
Yeah. I mean, I would say in 99% of the drafts, 100% of the drafts I go into, I usually have a plan of spending uh, for sure $80, probably about somewhere between $70 to $90 on my top two running backs, or sorry, wide receivers,
Wide receivers.
something along those lines. Um, so yeah, I would say that I am always going to opt for trying to get some bigger receivers because I feel like they're more reliable. And like I said, I play in all PPR leagues, so they're also an asset, because they're catching
For sure.
passes. So you're getting that scoring advantage too. Um, so yeah, I'm going to load up on those guys.
All right. And then do you want to name 2 or 3 guys? I know you already have, but just because this guy's going to be listening for his name, 2 or 3 guys that at the running back position then that you might be targeting.
Sure. So if I'm going to load up on receivers, then I find a good number as a baseline. Then I'm going to devote 35% of my budget for 3 running backs. And then maybe, obviously I'm not just going to draft 3 and that's it. That leaves me, to spend a few bucks depending on what you allocate to your bench. And, obviously these numbers aren't set in stone. I mean, part of budgeting is being able to, switch and move some numbers around and everything. But I find 35% is if you want big receivers, then it's a good ballpark. And I, try and go somewhere like 35 for my RB1, 20 for my RB2, and then maybe 15 for my RB3 or my flex or whatever, however your scoring is. And that allows me to target guys, like I said, 4 set. I love Frank Gore in PPR leagues this year. CJ Spiller, I've got a lot of shares of him because I feel like he's undervalued. So yeah, I mean, those are some guys that I target. Even, LeGarrette Blount for $15 or even a little bit less is a guy that I like to look at as an RB3. So yeah, those are guys that I typically would target then if I'm going with that kind of strategy.
Okay, so you pretty much answered the next question, I guess, which is at Zales 2525. How much should I allocate to RBs on his $200 budget? So I guess you just spoke to that quickly. He goes, do you prefer going with the top tier RB1? So that's Charles and AP. I think we already spoke to that too, a little bit too much for our liking. But if you were, let's say you could get, I don't know, say you're price enforcing, whatever the case may be, maybe you get AP for $60. So what do you do? How do you who do you surround him with is what the question is.
Sure. I mean, if I'm going to go with that strategy, something along those lines, I mean, I'll use it as an example. One of the drafts that we did a few weeks ago now, I was price enforcing Levy and Bell, and I ended up getting them for $52, which turned out afterwards that was quite a good price considering where I think he was one of the cheapest guys as far as, a top 10 running back went. So I was kind of happy with that in the end, even though it messed up my budget a little bit. But I think if you're going to go with that strategy, allocating something like 45% of your budget is maybe a good little benchmark. And you can go something like 55, 20, 15 for your 3 running backs. So then, you spend 55, or even if you go a little bit higher and spend 60, you can drop your RB3 to 10, which is going to probably allow you to get someone like Shane Vereen. To me, Danny Woodhead is a guy who goes really cheap that I love in PPR leagues this year. And again, LeGarrette Blount is a guy I think is an RB3 is good. If you can stomach, Rashad Jennings or Shane Vereen, as I mentioned, kind of that backfield, if you like I personally like Vereen a little bit more this year in that backfield only because of his PPR ability. Gio Bernard to me is a guy that I think is taking a little bit of a hit. And if you need to spend $10, 15 on a running back, I think you can get him in that price range sometimes. And Doug Martin's a guy,
I was just going to mention
the buzz is going up maybe a little bit. If I can get him as an RB3, I'm happy because he's a starting running back. I don't expect him to have humongous weekly production, but I think he'll, mix in a few big weeks and he should get quite a bit of touches. I mean, the offensive line isn't great there, but if he can get you, 15 plus touches a week, he should
Right.
be able to, put up some decent points. And, if he finds the end zone or breaks off a big run, that's great.
You might get lucky and see Chris Ivory fall to that $10, $12
Sure,
mark
he's another
too,
guy.
which
Right now, a
falls
starter.
Yeah.
I mean, you're really just looking for guys that are going to get volume throughout the season at that spot. And there are some names out there, like to me, LeGarrette Blount. He's a guy who is overlooked. We know how that New England running back situation is, but and he's suspended to first week. So I think if anything, it brings his price down. But he gets a lot of touches, and especially if you can use him, as a running back 3, and you don't have to necessarily start him. When they play the Colts, start him because he just kills them.
Rips them up.
Any team that you think they're going to be, the Patriots are going to be able to beat, fairly handily, you use him because that means he could get 30 touches that week. So yeah, there's going to be weeks he has massive weeks for you. So to me, he's a good guy to target as a bench guy or a RB3.
All right. So let's move on to the next question. This is from @Renault_. If I recognize the name, I think it's one of our listeners from Brazil. If I'm correct, worldwide. I was gonna maybe I'll play some Pitbull there or something. I don't know. Mr. Worldwide, isn't that what he calls himself? I think my kids listen to him enough that
I try not to listen to any Pitbull. So I'm not really familiar.
Your kid's too young still. That's why. You're lucky. So anyway, so he's got a question here. How much are you spending on Arian Foster? Now, just to clarify something on Arian Foster too, I was just looking through our sheets. It hasn't been long enough that we have enough good evidence on what his AAV is. So right now it is still listing very high, but we have adjusted our rankings accordingly. So you can still see that consensus rankings, but that's just one anomaly on our rankings and with the VI metric that we just don't have enough enough values in to really adjust that AAV yet. So just keep that in mind when you're looking on the website. So how much would you be willing to spend right now on Arian Foster?
It's tough. I hate investing. I mean, there's a couple reasons, and I guess I'll preface it sounding like the know-it-all, but I called this. Not the specific injury, but I recall saying at one point that I was willing to bet that if you looked at the next 2 years of production from him, he wouldn't get a full 16 games of playing time. And I don't like seeing injuries like this, but I just felt like the writing was on the wall. And obviously you can't predict these injuries, but he was starting to show signs of becoming this injury-prone type running back. I hate players with soft tissue injuries, which he's had a few of. They're a nightmare to recover from permanently. So I don't know where to put him, only because I'm down on him, probably lower than most anyway. So I look at it. My first instinct when I see this is I personally feel like I'm not spending more than $7 on him. And if it's in a shallow league, I'll just say I'm never going to buy him, probably ever, because I would have to spend $5 on him. And you're never going to get him for that cheap, because there's always going to be somebody who's looking at it thinking, man, you know what? If I get Arian Foster and stash him, I can use him at the end of the season. He's going to be what it takes to put me over the top, and I'm going to just steamroll all the way through the playoffs to a championship. And that very well could happen. But a guy with that kind of mentality is going to probably be willing to overpay to get a player like that because he's falling in love with him. So I really feel like $10 is probably a realistic number, even though that's higher than maybe I would go. And even then, I don't know if you'll be able to get him for that. Especially once news comes out, like they're saying, well, it's not as bad as initially thought.
Yeah. Which is what I was just going to say. Yeah.
It sounds like maybe week 8 he could be back, if not sooner. I mean, that's great. Obviously, that helps his value. So I would say, $10 should be your max on him. I look at it like week 8 is probably a good timeline for him. Anything above that is gravy, but it could also be later than that too. So you got to be careful. But yeah, I mean, $10 is probably an all right area to look at.
Well, and that's where he falls in as far as the rankings go. Consensus
exactly.
right now, we have him at 35, and that's where it falls in the $10 to $12 range. I'm with you too. I don't think I'm investing it at all. And he's the guy that you're walking into the draft going, man, I just heard some news that didn't have to reattach the muscle, and he's going to be right back at it. 2 or 3 weeks, and hype him up a little bit and hope for the best.
Yeah.
Soak some money.
And, I mean, when I first looked at it, I mean, I have him ranked lower than the rest of you guys. I'm a little bit more skeptical. Like I said, I know I'm lower on Foster than a lot of people, even though I get that when he's on the field, he's as productive as pretty much any running back in the game, week in and week out. It's just that I'm not willing to invest on him being there all the time, even though when he is, he's going to probably put you up 20 points a game for you. But yeah, so I mean, based on my rankings, I have him, $5 is probably a good ballpark. And so I guess you got to kind of gauge what you view. Look at your rankings, right?
Right.
This is why we tell you to rank the guys. So
yeah, that's right. Do your own rankings, do your own tiers. If you're a member of the website, then you can download our tier sheets and our cheat sheets and customize those things the way you want. And, I mean, even just for me, I don't have to type out everybody's names. They're just there. I can copy and paste. So that's a good thing too. But yeah, okay. So that's the ballpark. I don't think I'm spending. I think if I could get them for $5, yeah, I'm buying. If I can get them for less than $10, I think I'd be interested in it. But I don't know if I want to spend much more than that. Personally, you can get Blount for about the same or a little bit more. I think at least you're going to get. Well, you're hoping you're not going to get 16 games out of Arian Foster. So I'd rather someone that has a shot at 16 games.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and then the last Twitter question is from @MacDogbert. He asks, "Who are your favorite $1 to $3 lottery tickets?" This one came in right at press time. So what do you think, Slim?
Well, a couple names that jump out for me anyway. Benny Cunningham's one. I mean, even when Gurley comes back, well, even when Gurley wasn't there last year with just Mason, Cunningham was used a lot in passing situations. Gurley, I don't think is going to change that. They're going to keep him limited. I think Benny Cunningham will be on the field a lot on third downs and in passing situations. So I still think he carves out a niche. And I think that's an important thing to look at when you're looking for these, lottery tickets. I try and find guys that offer a unique skill set to their team. Because that way they're minimizing the competition for specific reps. So if they have a skill set that no one else has, there's no one else really to challenge, if they need, say, a passing running back or, something along those lines. So, I mean, to me,
whatever.
Yeah, like to me, he fits that mold. And, Matt Jones is another guy who fits that mold. Rookie for the Washington Redskins. Alfred Morris, he's not known for his passing prowess. And Matt Jones has looked good so far doing that. So I could see him carving out a role as the third down running back. I think Silas Redd, he might even be done for the year. He got injured. He was a guy that was in the mix for that. So now it looks like Matt Jones has kind of got a clear path to that role, which is good. Another guy I look at is Jerick McKinnon. If you're one of these people that feel like, running backs that get over 30 years old, they're just destined to get hurt or wear down, then you have to take Jerick McKinnon because he's looked phenomenal with the limited reps that he does get for a guy that's only learned to play running back about 5 years ago and getting a lot of this time in the NFL, learning how, like, I think he averaged something like 5 yards a carry last year. without AP there. So he can do it. It's just, is he going to get the reps to do it? So another guy, Chris Polk, with the whole mess that's in Houston. If you're not an Alfred Blue, total believer, I think Polk for $1 is a good guy to take a flyer on. He's got a lot of good athletic qualities that I think will suit him to this running game. And if you can get him for $1, then why not? Because he's not like he's got to beat out a bunch of talented other guys. Like Alfred Blue is kind of just a guy. They don't have much else there. So there's no reason why Polk can't get touches. And the same thing with Lance Dunbar. If you're not a real Randall believer, which I'll say I'm not.
Yeah,
I mean, McFadden's already hurt. Well, I look at it, everybody's saying, oh, they got this awesome offensive line. And, well, you know what? You still have to have talented running backs to take advantage of that. I don't think Joseph Randall is that talented. He's good. But just to say, here you go, you're just going to take all of DeMarco Murray's workload. Well, it doesn't work that way.
He's going to get 400 rushing attempts. Go ahead.
No, never. And even if he did, that doesn't mean can do what DeMarco did. DeMarco Murray is a much better running back. So I think guys like Lance Dunbar will be able to carve out some kind of role. And even if Randall gets hurt, here you go, or does something stupid, then Dunbar should be right in the mix there. Because Darren McFadden, he might not even make the roster if he stays injured like this. So they can get rid of him. And then a couple other rookies, Carlos Williams, he's sick right now with some unknown illness, but he's right in the mix to be the second running back in Buffalo. They're projected to run the ball a ton. So he could very easily become the RB2 there, which should allow him to get some decent volume. And then Josh Robinson in Indy, high-powered offense behind an aging running back. Like I said, if you're a believer in these aging running backs wearing down, then you might want to take a flyer on him. He's got the skill set to fit in that offense where he can catch the ball as well as run between the tackles. So he could very easily be Frank Gore's backup. And again, he's got to beat out Dan Herron, who isn't talented really. So it's not like it's a big hurdle for him to overcome. So good luck trying to hit the lottery.
Yeah, it's hard. Well, hey, for $1, Chris Johnson just signed. I mean, who knows? Like, these are like long shots, right? Swinging for the fences. Right now we have Trey Mason as a $3 AAV. If Gurley's not going to be around the first couple of games, I mean, there's a couple of $1 that's kind of worth it. You might see Reggie Bush fall into that zone too. He might be worth it. A Roy Halou even, like guys that are in that $3 kind of cusp, right? And I had one more I was gonna, even Ryan Matthews. I mean, DeMarco, quote unquote, injury prone, but still, as we're going to come up in the news later on, he might get more work than you think. And I mean, he's was a Pro Bowl talent, right? At one point.
No, so. I mean, I like all those names. The one I'm probably the lowest on is Mason, only because they play Seattle week 1. That's the only reason why I'm a little skeptical. I don't expect him to do it. I think Gurley is probably not going to play in the preseason, which means he probably will be very limited in week 1. And if I'm the Rams, why do I want to trot my stud running back out against the Seahawks for his first game? So even if Mason does get a lot of touches, I don't expect him to do much with them just because of the defense they're playing. And then who knows when Gurley comes back? I mean, they still might split. I just don't see it being enough for Mason. But
week 7 last year, I just pulled up the stat. They play Seattle. He gets 18 attempts for 85 yards and a score. He does lose a fumble in that, but still scores 14.5 points. It's his 3rd highest game of the year, Trey Mason.
Well, I'm not willing to gamble on that. Actually, I think I remember that because I have him in our Dynasty League, and I probably even played him that game. Ironically enough, that was like one of his biggest games of the year. Yeah. Was against the Seahawks defense. But
18 touches for 85 on a score. That's you'll take that for $3.
Oh, hey, believe me, if he can do that, for sure. And that's not to say he can't do it week 2, or I'm just saying that's why I'm lower on than I know you guys on him. But
I mean, and it gets to be a pretty big crapshoot when you're in the 40s and 50s. And I just tried to finish off my ranks here before we got on the air, and it's like, oh no, I think I like this guy more. And who do you want more in the 50s? You want Fred Jackson or Jerick McKinnon or Monty Ball or Matt Jones? I probably don't want any of them, but
no.
For a dollar.
You split hairs too.
Yeah.
Time.
Yeah. So anyways, all right. So those are Twitter questions. We had a ton of them. If you want to send us a Twitter question, we are at Fantasy Auction. If 140 characters is not enough, it's footballauctioneer@gmail.com. All right, let's get into the second segment here, Slim. This is the fantasy football news, buy or sell. So in the buy or sell, what we do here is we talk to our experts about the fantasy implications of the latest news items. And staying with the running back theme, this was a big one that came out tonight. So this is Monday, August 17th, and Pro Football Talk came out with this at 6:45, so it's a few hours before we got on the air. The talk is, well, not the talk, it is now official that the Cardinals have signed Chris Johnson. So he's signed a one-year deal with the Cardinals, and the Cardinals had Johnson in for a physical and workout today and revealed that he is ready to go and fully healed from his shoulder injury that he suffered when he was shot in the offseason. So, Slim, the question is, buy or sell? CJ is now worth owning in your auction league.
Oh, I have a hard time saying yes, only because I hate CJ Anderson as a fantasy running back. I mean, I'm going to sell because how can I say this nice? Well, I don't think he's very good anymore. He only gets what's there. We know the speed that he is to have. The keyword is, I think, used to. I don't think he has it anymore.
30 next month.
30 so. Are going to be 30 really quick. So, I mean, how much is he going to be used? I mean, to me, Ellington's still the main guy. He's definitely going to be used in most of the passing situations. He'll probably get a lot of, between the tackle work as well. Chris Johnson, I wouldn't be surprised if, he gets 8 to 10 touches a game. I just don't think he's going to be able to do that much with them. I mean, he's not a real power runner. So to me, he has no real goal line use. So I'm not sure exactly what he's, going to really bring to the table here that David Johnson maybe didn't already bring. So unless they're worried that maybe David Johnson just wasn't showing enough, or this is something to motivate him, or because David Johnson was injured, ironically enough, he came back to practice today with this signing. I don't know if it was coincidence. I'm sure that had something maybe to do with it. But anyway, I don't think you need to rush to the waiver wire to get him. Let someone else overpay, waste a roster spot. And I think there'll be better candidates that emerge later in the preseason.
Okay. Well, and that's it. And that was my big question then, is this kind of make David Johnson, not that I was going to target him or anything, but I would consider him pretty much undraftable then if you're going to have this kind of mess there.
Yeah, it is kind of a mess. And I do think that, to me, David Johnson's the guy that gets hurt the most by this because, like I said, to me, Ellington gets the majority of passing situations. So it was whatever can David Johnson carve out, on the ground. Can he become a goal line back, short yardage back, something like that? I don't think he really can at the moment. But we'll see how things keep emerging in training camp.
All right, so the next news item here is that Chip Kelly was quoted as saying, "I wanted to have 2 running backs." So we saw in the preseason opener against the Colts that DeMarco Murray, didn't do a whole lot, I guess, or did he play?
I never saw that game actually. Actually, I wanted to watch it today, and I missed I switched to NFL Network a half hour in, and of course, all the starters were out by then.
So, anyways, by the end of last season from the playoffs, he touched the ball almost 500 times. And so maybe they're resting him up, who knows. But Chip Kelly did say that their plan the whole time was to get another running back with him because he wanted to have 2 backs, and that's why they got Ryan Matthews. So he says, I don't think you can have a guy who carried it 370 to 400 times per season and be successful. We're going to run a lot. We always do, but we'll have more than one guy doing it. So, Slim, the question is, buy or sell? You should be dropping your DeMarco rankings just a bit right now.
I'm going to buy. This is one of the reasons why I had him a little bit lower than a lot of other people anyway. And I still might even continue to drop him. I've seen him go as low as, RB12. I read a couple of weeks ago, some beat writer on Twitter, maybe it was a week ago, had once put something that I put the split down here, I think. He predicted that it was going to be a 50, 35, 15 split with that backfield between Murray, Matthews, and Sproles. So I don't want my RB1 getting half the snaps. I mean, that just doesn't seem like something that is going to be value for me then. So hearing things like that definitely gives me cause for concern and definitely makes me want to bump him down my rankings. If, there's a tie with somebody, then I think I'm just about always going to opt for the other guy at that price. I mean, I guess depending on the price. What do we have him? His AAV is $49. So, I mean, CJ Anderson's 47. For me, I'm going to take CJ Anderson 100 times out of 100 if I got to pick between those two guys. But that's just me. I don't think CJ Anderson gets 50% of the carries. I think he gets a lot more than that, or touches. So that's a good thing. So yeah, it's definitely something you got to pay attention to. This is, And Ryan Matthews looked good when he played. Yeah. I think he only had 2 carries, but I want to say it was for something like 18 yards on those 2 carries. So, when does the ball drop? Is he going to get hurt? Probably at some point, but we'll see.
Yeah, no, and I mean, Ryan Matthews getting hurt, that's pretty synonymous with Ryan Matthews, right?
That doesn't happen.
He always gets your hopes up. He always makes you think like, well, maybe, and then
not me.
No,
Lister.
I
don't know if I've ever really.
I've never owned them.
I can't remember though, so that's a good thing.
Yeah. All right. So we'll just keep that as the short little bit of news items. And we've talked a lot of running back strategy already, and we are somewhere around that 40-minute mark already, which is just like what we did last week with the wide receivers. But the Twitter questions really get you rolling through all that, so that's good. So let's just take a look at, and I think what we'll do is basically go through some of the same things that we did last week with Blister, Slim, and just kind of, I guess, talk our way through the running back position as a whole, maybe. So the first thing I have here on the list is like, what are some of your strategies? And I know we've kind of spoke to it earlier, but what are some of your strategies when it comes to running backs this season?
Well, I don't really have a set strategy. Again, like I said, I always go into my drafts with a couple plans, usually 3, and usually they're quite different. So in one of the strategies, it's to spend big money on one running back. Mm-hmm. So what I like to do then is, and I do this with every budget that I make, I try and put however much I want to spend on said position, whether it's my RB1, RB2, tight end 1, tight end 2. I'd like to try and figure out, okay, how much money do I want to spend? And then what players would I look at getting in that price range? Right. So I know roughly, if I want to spend $50 on a running back for my RB1, who are a couple names that I think fall into that group of guys that I want, and conversely, guys that I don't want. So because running back is going to dictate how, you're going to draft the rest of the way, especially if you get this big running back that you spend a considerable amount of money on, I try and figure out really early, am I going to get that guy or not get those whatever guy that I want to get? So say I like CJ Anderson and DeMarco Murray. I might even nominate one of those guys really early. Because if I know both those guys go off the board, all right, I'm not using this draft strategy anymore. I can kind of throw it out the window. I'm going to my, I'm getting 2 running backs for $25 a piece now. and I can start figuring out, all right, how am I going to get them? When am I going to nominate them? So I like to try and get that, figure out which approach I'm going to start to use as early as possible. And I know it goes against what some people say, but if I got to nominate a guy to do that, I'll nominate a guy to do that. And if I get him, then great. I know where I'm headed. So
it's like a price check, right? I mean, let's just price check this tier and see what's happening. And
sure. Yep. And I mean, maybe, you can always decide, hey, I'm going to go with trying to get some cheaper running backs, and you get dinged with a certain player. For example, my brother was doing a draft tonight, and he was texting me before we went on, and I'm not sure what his strategy was, but he said at some point he ended up getting Jeremy Hill for $30, and it kind of messed up his budget, but he said, well, it was too cheap to pass up, and whatever, I'll make the adjustments. And that's what you got to do. I mean, you take the values when they're there and rework it, but it's still nice to have your game plan. And if you can stick to it as close as possible, it makes it easier for you. Less jockeying, the more you can focus on what's going on. But by all means, don't feel like you have to stick to that. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of my strategy anyway. I don't know. That doesn't necessarily work for everybody, but I find that's a good way for at least me to get a fairly firm direction of which path I'm going to head down in this given draft.
Right.
Fairly early anyway.
And once I heard that Paulson stat on the RBs, I mean, my first inclination is to go after my top two ranks.
Peterson, going to get him.
Yeah. But I mean, you know me, I'll sit on my wallet and come home with $22 at the end of the draft. But I mean, that's my first instinct anyways, is like, I kind of want to go after it. But I head into a draft a little bit differently than you guys do. I don't necessarily put a dollar value on each position as far as like RB1 and RB2. My budget's so that I can keep myself flexible. I'll say I'm going to spend $80 on running backs. And then I kind of work it from there. And so if I can get Adrian Peterson for $58, then that leaves me the difference for my RB2 and et cetera, et cetera. But if I can't get him at a price point where I think he's viable, then maybe now I'm starting to look at $243 running backs or whatever the case may be.
Right.
And so I kind of have that loose budget by position. And right now, that's what I'm kind of tossing around, is how much do I allocate to that RB1, RB2. Sometimes I throw flex as that guy, but the last couple of years, I've been kind of putting flex as its own position because
it could be a receiver, it could be
exactly. And now that we're PPR, it does kind of lean itself towards the receiver. So I'm actually can put a lesser
right.
When we were doing standard, right, it was a little bit different.
Sure.
So now I can, a Larry Fitz like I did in that last draft at $3 or whatever.
Well, that's it, right? If you want it to be a receiver, typically a flex receiver is going to be slightly cheaper than a flex type of running back. So you can save a little bit of money there if you opt to go receiver.
So that's how I'm kind of going into it this year is, again, it's just that RB1, RB2, this is the set value that I'm looking for, and that allows me to be flexible within that range. My big thing is how much am I going to allocate? I'm doing like you. I'm like, if I'm going to spend $80 on two running backs, what does that look like? It looks like AP and LeGarrette Blount, or does it look like Justin Forsett and Jeremy Hill?
Well, that's important. I mean, because if you say buy AP, you might not like any of the options that you have left at whatever you've got left over. So I think it's important to know then, if this is where I'm going, what is my team? What can it potentially look like? And if you don't like the way it looks, then you know that that's not a rate you even want to try and go in a draft. So it's important to do that, I think.
So I just have this piece of paper where I just I write down a team. Okay. And I try to think of it like, maybe I'm gunning for AP, but let's just say a top tier running back. And I think that's more realistic because we do look at that horseshoe, right? and how those guys would fall in. So maybe I don't get AP, but I get Jamal Charles or I get Lynch or somebody in that kind of upper tier.
Yep.
Then what do I like on my team? Okay, well, let's backtrack. Then let's try this again. Keep the $80 at running back, but change the, it's tier 3 running backs now, 2 tier 3 running backs rather than a 1 and a 5 or whatever it is. And just see what I like. And then it at least allows me to know that in the draft, would I go $2 more on a guy that I have pegged at $55? Do I go to 57 or 58 because I like what the team will look like? Or do I not do that because I just don't like the structure of that team afterwards? So it's kind of doing, we've talked about this before. It's kind of like doing your own mock drafts, but right on a piece of paper, right?
For sure.
So
that's exactly what it is. Yep.
Yeah. You're not live against other people, but I try to be realistic in that I'm not going to get all my targets right at the exact AAVs. And so then, so I'm going to, I'm not going to fool myself too much when I'm trying to develop those strategies. So, okay. So the next thing that we looked at last week with the with wide receiver podcast was just taking a look at how we tier and rank the position. So when you take a look at running backs, what are some of the things you're doing in order to tier them like you have on a tier sheet in the member site?
The two biggest things I feel like when you go to tier for running backs are you have to know which running backs project to be 3 down backs, because that's going to be more touches. And I want to know who projects to be have the most scoring opportunities or the chances to score. So I want running backs that don't come off the field, that have opportunities to touch the ball. And a lot of the times you look at rankings, those guys, there's a reason why Eddie Lacy, Jamal Charles, Le'Veon Bell are always at the top, because those guys are 3 down backs. But when you start getting a little bit lower, where do you put Frank Gore? Do you think he's a true 3 down back in this offense? Well, then you have to bump him up a little bit. We just talked about DeMarco. Well, it might sound like he's not going to be a 3 down back there. He's going to lose touches. So you have to make those kinds of adjustments. And to me, those are the biggest things. Then once you kind of get them lumped together, how do you start breaking ties? Well, what situations are guys going to be used in? How does that apply to your league scoring? So as a guy passing back, well, then he might get a slight uptick in PPR leagues and things like that. What's the team situation? That's another big one. If they have a bad offense, well, that's going to limit scoring opportunities. Is the quarterback play bad? Is the offensive line play bad? Little things like that, And then I try and tier now based on how many points I project players to score. I'll try and actually predict into lumps. How many receptions do I predict this guy is going to have? How many rushing yards? How many touchdowns? Well, I can kind of roughly figure out then how many points then I predict. And I can kind of put like players together in those groups. So that's kind of how I build my tiers. And then I actually label my tiers based on the point values that I anticipate them scoring throughout the season. So if that makes based on the total fantasy points they'll score.
See, and it's good because I approach things differently. I take a look. I put my ranks in, and it's kind of a lot of the same things that you're talking about there. And then I list the average auction values with those guys, and I just find the natural breaks. And then I, within that tier, set my rank. Like sometimes I kind of look, well, I guess the first thing I do, is I take a look at what the AAVs are and where the natural breaks are. And then from there, then I input my rankings into that. So how, let's say we might have a consensus ranking and the AAVs associated with it. And then I go in and then I adjust my rankings within those natural breaks in the AAV. And then I'll go into each of the tiers. There's some guys that will be ranked much higher than I like in that tier, and I'll just put an X through them. I like to leave them in the tier but I just strike them out already because I don't want any part of, 2 years ago Ryan Matthews or whatever the case may be, regardless of where he's ranked.
Yeah.
And then I just kind of color code them in this pretty looking spreadsheet, and that's how I work. And actually, right now, what I'm doing with a lot of these online drafts is, and I'm creating that cheat sheet for that particular draft, labeling that draft cheat sheet, and I document everybody's picks as we go. I don't always necessarily say like Slim bought this guy for $49, but I will say that he went for $49 so that I can start to try to find that horseshoe in that tier.
Right.
And I find that to be valuable as I go along too. So, and the way you guys lay out your tiers is a lot differently than the way I lay out mine, but I don't know. You guys don't necessarily post what your cheat sheet looks like. I don't know if you use your, that tier sheet that we have on the website as your actual cheat sheet when you come in, or is that what you use? Do you use that sheet?
I honestly don't really bring in a cheat sheet because I've done enough work that I know the players that I want. Yeah. I use my budget as a cheat sheet more or less because I know the prices that I have at each position in all my different budgets. And I know at those prices, I know which players fall into those. And based on those players, I know which players that do fall into there I want and ones I don't. So, I mean, I think you do it's a good way to do it. It's just, and for a lot of people that probably works really well. I just find that it's like, practicing, I guess, like an instrument or something, and once you know the music enough, you don't need the sheet in front of you anymore. So, and that's kind of how I look at it, is I try and minimize how much stuff I have at the draft so that I'm focusing on one or two things versus different things. And I know you use that probably more or as everything, so other than maybe a couple of your budgets, but so yeah.
Well, I literally will come in, I'm the tech guy, and everyone comes in with their laptops and their iPads and whatever. And
yeah, you look like Mike McCarthy with his play sheet, with all these colors, and it's laminated.
And that's really where I actually based it from.
Pocket.
Yeah, it's what I based it from, because
rolled up in your belt.
When I used to call the high school offense, that's what my cheat sheet looked like, and so I just based it off of that, so that it could be a quick reference. I bring in 2 pieces of paper only because, well, 3 pieces of paper, but 2 with anything on it. And those 2 are big enough that I can read it, but I have just all the positions and my ranks and my tiers color coded so it looks like a call sheet. And I literally put them onto a file folder. So I just open up the file, and there's my 2 sheets sitting in front of me. Then I bring a blank piece of paper just so that I can work out my budgets and how much I have left, and write down some targeted players and do that type of a thing. But I really do just use that cheat sheet. Again, this has nothing to do with running backs, I guess, for say, but I use that cheat sheet just to track each of the tiers.
Right.
So I can see where guys are going to be, and, there's 3 guys gone in my tier 3. I better start really taking a look at this a little bit more closely. So.
Yep.
That's good. That's good stuff. That's stuff you're not going to hear anywhere else. You should spend 30% of your budget, and that's what you do. That's good. That's good. Good. I like that. So anyways, if you head on over to our website, and that's one of the things that is in the membership area. Blister has his tier sheet there, and as he updates his, which I think he did today actually before he left to the lake, I think he updated his tier sheet according to the last save. But as he updates it, boom, it's updated on the website. You can download that particular file and customize it however you want. Slim's got his on there too, and then my color-coded quote-unquote call sheet that I use is also in there too. And then as we update it, it's updated there for you. So that's one of the perks of being a member. $14.95, blah blah blah. Little promo. Okay. So. Next question here, as far as running back position goes, Slim, who do you think is going to be the steal of this year's auction?
Well, a name you've probably heard me say a lot. I think right now it's shaping up to be Justin Forsett.
Yeah.
In PPR leagues, to me, he can be approach top 5 status. Last year, I think he had 44 catches, and now this year he's got Mark Trestman coming in, who just left a running back that had over 100 catches. So I expect those numbers to go up. They have one of the best offensive lines in football. For him to run behind again, he only had 8 touchdowns last year. I expect those numbers to go up. So I mean, I think the writing to me is on the wall. Like, I want to look up really quick. I think he finished as the 6th running back last year. Sorry, the 8th running back last year in PPR leagues. So to me, those numbers go up, barring, unless he gets hurt. So yeah, I think he can definitely approach top 5. And right now he's our most undervalued running back in terms of his AAV comparative to where we have him ranked. So he's, like I said, he's a guy that I get a lot in mock drafts and actual drafts. So there's a reason for that. It's because I'm higher on him than I think a lot of other people.
Yeah, and I agree too, especially in the PPR. He's a guy that you can get for good value. A guy, and I was trying to find up some sort of magical stat here for why, but I couldn't find one while you were talking, and I guess I should have planned a little bit better ahead of time. But I'm really curious to see what a guy like TJ Yeldon does this year. I just think that he could be a real workhorse, and any team you could get as far as a workhorse goes, maybe at that $15 value or something like that. Even if he creeps into RB2 status, the high end RB2, I think at $15, I think that's a really good deal. I mean, we do have him right now at $15 as an AAV, but positionally ranked at $22. So it is a little bit of a deal there as well. And I'm curious about Mark Ingram as well. I know right now he's not showing us a big value on our VI indicator, but I just think that if he can get workload, again, just trying to find guys that you could get relatively cheap that are going to touch the ball 200 plus times is going to be a good thing. Anyone else you want to label there? I'd love to see Latavius Murray go off too. I think he could be a value if he goes, but I just don't know if you hear good things and then you go, oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Right, is pretty good.
Yeah, and Latavius, I mean, there's the injury concerns and things like that. So I want to get behind him, and I think there'll be times I think in a best ball, he's a good choice because I think he might have some humongous games at times, and part of it is I think maybe the offense he plays in, there'll be some games where you're wishing that you started somebody else. So, but no, I like the Yeldon comment. To me, if this offense improves at all, then he can be on the field and a lot. And I was going to talk about him a little bit later when we talk about our rookies, but he shows to me to be a 3-down running back, which is something I value fairly high when I rank my players too.
And when you get into the rookies, I think that he's one of those guys that has potential to outdo Gordon, outdo Gurley. I just think
the only thing is
the situation, right?
I just worry about scoring opportunity. That's my biggest thing with him. But like I said, if that offense improves, then hopefully you would think there should be more chances for scoring opportunity. So unfortunately, a lot's going to come with Bortles. So if he improves, then I think that bodes well for Yeldon. And if not, then not that Yeldon will be awful, but it's definitely going to cap his potential.
All right. So next one, outside of Forsett and CJ Anderson, because you spoke to them too many times already, who's another running back that you're targeting?
Someone else that I've spoken about a lot, Frank Gore. Wow.
Oh, yeah, right. You only just kind of mentioned him. You thought he would be big, but that's about all you did. So that's good.
So, I've got him in drafts and some drafts for less than $20, which for me, he's a guy who can who could finish as a low end RB1 in PPR leagues.
Yeah.
If I'm getting him for less than 20, that's a steal in my opinion. So that's one reason I target him, is because I see him go cheap at times. I think he can catch 50 passes in this offense. I think, again, he's a 3-down back in this offense. His pass protection and his pass catching ability make him an asset to stay in the field for 3 downs. And I think that something that he didn't get in San Francisco is he should get plenty of scoring opportunities. I think this team can be in the red zone a lot. So his touchdown numbers should go up. So yeah, like I said, a running back who I think can approach RB1 numbers, so I have just outside of the RB1s, for around $20 to me is a steal. So like I said, he's a guy that I tend to target, especially as an RB2.
Well, for me, I mean, I like Jeremy Hill. That's a guy that I've been looking at a lot as far as mocks and those types of things. Mm-hmm. But I am really willing to, well, in our big auction coming up here in a couple weeks, I know I'm never going to get them because of just the people that are in our draft. But in the Scott Fish Bowl, for instance, and in some mocks, you see this guy falling and falling. But Adrian Peterson, I think, is just a swing for the fence. I mean, you think he can just come out and run angry and do some pretty spectacular things. I don't think he's going to fall outside that top 5. And so I think a bad year for him is going to be RB5, but I think he can easily be an overwhelming RB1 and the number 1 player in fantasy. I just, and if you can get him in a league where guys aren't going to be as high on him, rank him as their RB3 or RB4, I think he's worth a shot because of that high ceiling, but also very high floor. I mean, I know in our pool, there's going to be guys that are going to be trying to gobble him up, and he's going to go for $65, and that's just what it is. So I don't necessarily think I'm going to get him in our big valued league, but in other places, he's the guy that I'm willing to spend a little bit more money on as far as RBs. And, and I'm a little bit later, that Jonathan Stewart, just again, it's kind of that swing for the fence type of a thing where he has potential to way outplay his value. So I kind of like that too. Doug Martin. And I went for it in the last auction we did. I had money left over and I thought, I'm just going for Todd Gurley. And even if it's a few games in, if you can, I think I got him for $17. He's listed at $23 right now. I think that, you get him for less than $20. If he can go off after week 5, let's say, he's in a good position, right? So that's another guy I'm kind of looking at.
I agree with, CJ Anderson we talked about. That's another one I target, but
I know. Well, and that's a guy that I think Blister too, that hold highly. And I really think his AAV of $47, do you think he's going to go in our big draft in a couple of weeks for more than 47 or less than 47?
I probably think he'll be 50 for sure.
Yeah.
I don't see going tons more. I really feel like in a lot of drafts where you draft with owners that have done a lot of auctions over the years, I feel like you see guys embracing more so the need not to worry about overspending to get a stud running back. They look at it like, you know what, I'm okay to spend, I don't want to call it the RB0, but a cheaper approach. They're fine saying, all right, well, I'll go and get Jeremy Hill later then, or something along those lines, or LaShawn McCoy. Oh, look, he goes for cheap. I like him. I'll go and get him then later. And so a lot of people will pull out of the bidding at, once it gets to about $55. It's a daunting number. When you start getting close to that 60 number, like that's a number for a lot of people that things pucker up a little bit, because you're talking about a big percentage of your budget. on one guy, and it drastically limits what you can do at other positions if you go and do that. So, yeah, I don't know. I just feel like EP goes for 6, but I don't know if he goes for that much over. You know,
But don't you think, like, our Vikings fan in the draft,
yeah, I think he's come around the last few years.
Smart enough to figure to not just always go with his heart.
Yeah, no, I do think that he's come around on that for sure. I mean, let's face it, we could exploit that in years past, I think, but
Yeah, that's true. It's not like he's the Bears fan.
I know when the one draft we did with him this year, he kind of went with a more balanced running back approach, and I actually liked his team after that. So he might too. So he might go with that too. I know last year he did the same thing. He kind of went with a balanced attack across the board.
Well, I know that when we did that draft, because there was that, the few guys that are going to be in the big auction, I made sure I documented what you folks were doing in that draft. Not that necessarily you're going to follow that same suit. So we're going to walk in. This is my budget. This is all that I do. But
I can tell you, I'm not following what I did last year because there's no way I'm buying Pete Manning.
In that ESPN league, though, there was. Oh no, you weren't in that league. Were you in that league?
Yeah, the expert one.
Yeah. But just to kind of see who guys were kind of on and not on and those types of things, because I think you're right. I think our league has definitely matured over the last few years. And what you could get away with before, you can't get away with now. They're a little bit more savvy.
Just to tell you, my plan going into that draft as the first player I was going to buy was Arian Foster, because I thought nobody would ever think that I would do that. And I knew that I would own 0 shares of him anywhere else this year. So I thought, I'm going to diversify a little bit, and I'm going to buy Arian Foster in this draft. And I thought that I was only one other guy I would even have to worry about going up against for him. And it turns out that guy bought him for way more than I was willing to spend. So
yeah, that's right.
It became a moot point, and then literally the next day is when his groin disintegrated. So it was quite comical.
Right. And he's a Texans fan at that.
Wow, that's exactly it.
So let's move on. Who's one guy and it could be more than one guy, but who are you avoiding at all costs at the running back position?
My biggest avoid right now is LaShawn McCoy. I think everybody's all looking at, they're going to run the ball so much, and they're going to, I can smash my head against a wall 400 times, and that doesn't mean I'm actually going to get through the wall, right?
Right.
So I just think that it's going to be, a frustrating year for McCoy owners this year. The offensive line isn't great. I think the offense is going to be fairly inept. Their quarterback play is a huge question mark. So that, to me, limits their red zone chances. A new offensive coordinator they got, Greg Roman, doesn't utilize running backs in the passing game. He didn't with Frank Gore, who was, before Roman showed up, one of the better receiving backs in the NFL. So I don't feel confident in him doing that with McCoy. Plus, I just don't think McCoy can handle. Just to say, he's going to get 350 carries. Well,
yeah.
Why? I mean, he might be dead after week 8. Getting
he did have 315 carries last year.
Yeah,
I didn't realize that. Well, he finished the RB12. I'm just looking at PPR right now. So he had 315.
So was that good compared to where he was drafted, do you think?
No, I don't think so. No, but he did rush for 1,320 yards or 19 yards.
He averaged 12 points per game. If I just average that quick, where did that rank him? That ranked him as the RB22 in terms of fantasy points per game.
But wasn't that?
That was a game that was with Pro Football Focus's. I think they ranked them as the best offensive line.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I just look at that 1,300 yards rushing. I mean, where it hurt him is that he didn't score touchdowns in Philadelphia. I mean, it was only five touchdowns, which is the lowest in the top 15.
Buffalo might get 5.
Yeah.
First 10 weeks as a team.
He might get more tackles than touchdowns. So what do you think?
Emmanuel ends up getting on the third string, maybe.
Yeah. What do you like?
Picking up fumbles.
Listen, that's not something you'd hear on other pods, though, right? Like nobody's having that over under, like, or that bet. Who scores? Does Deshaun McCoy get more touchdowns or tackles?
It's a good point. I don't know. I think I'll still go with the touchdowns, but
it's close. No, I don't think he sticks his neck in there for
that's what I'm thinking. I just don't think he will.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I don't blame him. I might not either.
O-line tends to get the most tackles from what I see.
I mean, this guy goes for $47. I mean, I'm taking CJ Anderson over him. I'm taking Justin Forsett over him. There's just a lot of other guys that I'd rather take.
Yeah, no, I agree. Anyone else on that list that you're avoiding?
Carlos Hyde is another guy, and we've talked about this in other pods.
I know, but it's just I know that our listeners will be like, "What?"
I mean, I think he's very overvalued right now. Everybody just assumes, they're going to run the ball a lot, and ideally, I think they probably would run the ball a fair amount. So I just think they're not going to have that luxury. They're going to be losing in a lot of games. And
you like Reggie Bush?
I actually don't mind Reggie Bush, just because, I think they're going to have to be playing catch up, and Carlos Hyde's not going to be in the field playing catch up. I don't think so. I think there's going to be a good chunk of the game where Hyde just won't be on the field getting touches, and somebody else will, whether it's Kendall Hunter or whether it's Reggie Bush or whatever.
Running the football.
Well, yeah, but are they going to score tons of touchdowns? I don't think so. I just, to me, have a hard time taking him as an RB2, especially in PPR leagues. I don't have him as an RB2 in PPR leagues.
No, you have him outside your top 24. You have him at 27. Mm-hmm. And right now his AAV is $28. And like you, I would probably get Gio or TJ Yeldon at that 15 to 18 mark and save $10 and be able to slam that into, I would say Abdullah, but that's the first. I just want that to be known that on August 17th at 10:23, that was the first time we mentioned Amir Abdullah, and he's been just blowing up the entire fantasy world. So it took us well over an hour to mention his name. Just saying.
Yeah, it's coming up.
Yeah, I know. It was sick, though, the one play. You watch that on Twitter over and over again, and I'm showing my kid, and he's like, whoa, and he's 9, and he thought it was wicked. So anyways, but just looking at it, and the first thing that jumped to my mind, I'm like, well, where does Slim have Reggie Bush? And you have Reggie Bush at 39, and you have Carlos Hyde at 27, but the dollar value difference is $24.
Yeah.
So maybe you'd rather be the Reggie Bush owner and save a bunch of money. And
I would. For sure.
Get Latavius Murray or get a Andre Ellington. Maybe he's actually one of the guys that I think I might avoid.
Ellington?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. But
it's hard to trust him injury wise. Yep.
So the guy I'm going to put on the list that I'm going to avoid. I think right now I'm going to avoid Melvin Gordon only because I think his values, and I know I have him ranked higher than you do, but I think in my tier sheet, when I'm going to create it, I move him down in that list.
Mm-hmm.
I just I don't know. I just think he has the potential to be the two down back.
That's why I have him where he is too. Yeah,
and
it's part of why I like Woodhead. I just think Woodhead's just always been like he always carves out a role. Rivers trusts him. We saw even in their preseason game. Gordon didn't score that rushing touchdown.
Yeah,
Danny Woodhead did. So
and I don't know how he gets away with that, old Danny Woodhead. Like He gets
I know.
lost behind the line of scrimmage, and then poof.
Yeah, always landing on his feet. That guy, he just comes out smelling like, well, except for last year breaking his leg, but just comes out smelling like roses.
I did see a good fantasy name. It was, and I'm not going to drop the F bomb, but it was Wanna F bomb. Well, Woodhead be out of the question. I thought that's pretty good.
Well, you had to add the comma because that changes everything.
Yeah. Comma, right? Sorry, which I thought is pretty good. And another guy, I think, well, just because we play PPR is Alfie Morris. I don't necessarily want any part of him. Not at that $25 to $30 mark, and I hope that he goes for less. If he goes for less, then I'd think about it.
Okay with that, though. I really am. I mean, he puts up enough points on the ground that, again, it comes to volume. He's not a 3-down back, but he gets a lot of volume, first and second downs. So to me, if I get him as an RB2 for $25, I mean, that's definitely pretty much the height I would go to get him. I'm not going to go out and get in a bidding war because I need Alfred Morris on my team, but I wouldn't be disappointed if I got him for that. And if you can get him for less. The thing is, he's a guy I think you want to watch always because he gets such a bad rap in PPR leagues. And again, it shows you how PPR, we emphasize it, and then like it's not as bad as we think it is just because the guy doesn't catch a ton of passes. He still scores well in PPR leagues. It's just we assume that he doesn't just because he doesn't catch balls well. It doesn't matter. So you can use that a lot of the times to your advantage in your PPR leagues.
Yeah, true. And I'm gonna say it, but again, it's even after we talked about Abdullah, which is pretty good. I'm just gonna, and I'm sure you'll agree, just avoid the Dallas backfield altogether. I mean, I'm not spending $24 on Randall if you can get him cheap, but I just don't think he's.
Yeah, I just don't know where his ceiling's gonna end up. Like, there's going to be probably at least one guy in your league that just can't resist. He's like, he looks at that offensive line and DeMarco Murray's stat line from last year and just little saliva falls out of his mouth in the corner. Sure. And it's just a matter of where that point is going to be, where that guy is going to stop wanting to bid. But I agree. I look at it more like a running back by committee than one guy just taking the reins and putting up.
But I'd way rather have Frank Gore at that dollar value or Lamar Miller at that dollar value. I mean, by far. But then again, at that dollar value, I don't know if I'm into CJ Spiller as much as you are. I'd be nervous to own him. Like, you have him at 14. Yeah. And so if you're going to go not zero RB, but let's say you spend a ton on wide receivers, he could end up being your RB1. Are you comfortable with that?
I don't know if I've ever got him as an RB1. I'm just trying to think. I know I have him as RB2s. I feel like I have him and Gore a couple.
But, like, let's say, so you get him at that $20 mark, and then you pick up Doug Martin as your RB2, and
is he going to kill you if he gets hurt for $20?
No. Wow. Yeah. He will kill you, though, if your RB2 stinks.
Wow, but that's because you drafted a crappy RB2 then. I mean, you can't predict it. I mean, like, if you draft poorly, then, like, if guys don't hit, I don't care who you have. Sure. Like, you're gonna have hurdles to overcome. I don't know. Do the injuries worry me? Yeah, I mean, I don't typically, though. I feel bad saying it because I do it with Arian Foster, but I typically, for most players, don't draft worried or banking on them getting injured.
Right.
I look at, for me, what sells me for Spiller is the fact that he's actually, and I really believe it, he's going to be utilized correctly for the first time in his career. Like, Doug Marrone just let him rot in Buffalo. Yeah. Like, it blows me away how you're a professional coach or talent evaluator. even if you're not a good one, you still made it that far. You can't look at your personnel and say, all right, this isn't like you coach high school soccer, I coach high school basketball. Like, you have to look at who you have and say, all right, let's adapt our system or use this player in this situation. Like, you know, we do that at the high school level. How do these guys not do that at the pro level? Like, it just blew me away. So, and I think that Sean Payton showed that he can do that. And I really think that he could lead all running backs in receiving this year. So, hence number 14.
Right.
But
yeah, I don't know. I think he's just kind of the reason why I'm not going to do 2 top tier wide receivers. Like, I'm not going to do Dez and Julio or that type of thing, because I don't want to be stuck with a guy in there as my.
Well, there's that, and you don't have to. That's another thing too.
Well, yeah. I mean, I much rather do Jordy Nelson and Allen Robinson.
I'll be all right.
Yeah.
You know, so no, I agree.
All right. So, I mean, just quick, we'll have to wrap up here quick, but who's somebody that you think is going to be way overpriced this year?
I think DeMarco Murray, because we talked about his split. If there's a potential that he's only getting 55% of the touches, I don't want that at this price range. Jamal Charles is another guy for me that could potentially be overpriced. I mean, the guy's a freak. Was a freak. I'm not saying he won't be still. I just worry. We saw it a little bit last year with lower body injuries. Was he going to start to break down? He's getting up there in age. He's starting to hit that kind of, you know, magic number of 28 that a lot of people start getting freaked out about with running backs. And the coaching staff has come out and said they want to get more reps for Nile Davis. To try and keep Charles fresh throughout the season, because he was beat up at the end of last year. So if they make the playoffs, they need him, or they're trying to fight for the playoffs. So I just think if I got to pay a top 2 or 3 price for him, that could be a little steep for me. I'd much rather have Levy and Bell and AP, Lynch, even Lacey, like at that price range than Jamal Charles. Those guys seem a little less risky for me.
The improvement at the wide receiver position do anything to affect that too?
To affect my thought on him?
Just Jamal Charles is like thinking that he's going to go overvalued and maybe not live up to that value because you have Macklin.
Well, I think Macklin's definitely going to go in there.
You know, in Kelsey, and then Conley there, and even Albert Wilson with a little bit of a resurgence there.
No, I definitely think Macklin will, in one way or another, affect Charles, whether it's outright taking passing targets away or, just even having them run the ball a little bit less. I mean, he's the best wide receiver they've had there in some time, so I think he's definitely a viable wide receiver too in fantasy. So he's going to have to get those points somehow. So yeah, I think that can definitely hinder Charles's potential production somewhat. So yeah, I think, you have to consider that to some extent.
Just because I'm watching the Auction Kings emails right now, I enjoy the guy's name, kind of. Your mom is my slot receiver.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Quite offensive too.
Yeah. It's good. I'm just a simple hashtag yeah boy. I just kind of left it at that.
Well, that's okay.
But there's actually some pretty good names in there. It was good. I was going through actually on Twitter, went through Rumford Johnny, the hashtag free fantasy names or something. And if you scroll through that, there's some that actually made me laugh out loud. It was pretty good. The Woodhead one I thought was funny. Anyways, overvalued guys. And I know it's a late guy, but I think there's the Duke Johnson train. I think I just think you don't want any piece of that backfield as far as I'm concerned.
Well, you just offered a trade for him in our dynasty league.
Well, dynasty different than redraft, and I threw in picks. We didn't even get into that, but
Those are scabby. We can get into that off air.
I know they're scabby, but it's just kind of it's the banter. It's the banter.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's fine. I don't even know. I was trying to figure out value of Andre Williams at that point, and I don't know. I mean, let's talk about his value in redraft. Andre Williams. Any value?
Not much for me. I mean, to me, he's got value if Jennings goes out, and that's really about it. But that could happen.
Oh, I mean, for sure.
That's the way I look at it for him this year. And I'll be honest, that's why I started thinking about getting him off of you was if by some stretch Jennings goes down, then Andre Williams then gets a big boost.
Well, which is why, I mean, we said we'd talk about it off air, but which is why I thought maybe I'd start looking at the Duke Johnson, because maybe for this year, he's not as important to you.
Well, I'll put it this way. In a PPR league, I think that there's a chance Duke Johnson can still outscore Andre Williams this year.
Right. Okay. That's good to know off air.
He's got a couple, I mean, Terrence West might as well not even be on that roster. And it sounds like they
think
they hate him. Yeah. Well, I don't know about that, but yeah. I'm sure if they had a different option, they might. But that sounds like they don't like him just as a person. Let's get back to high school. I don't like you as a person. But and then Crowell's just nothing special. So I don't know. I don't think Duke Johnson's a big between the tackle runner, but
it was just
you're losing every game.
That flavor of the week. Oh, he had a good week in practice. I know you hear that all the time and whatever. And
it's not a good situation, but
no. All right, so now we're into so there's your transition into rookies. Are you drafting, or let's say, is there a rookie that you would draft in your redraft league this year?
I like TJ Yeldon. We've talked about it. I mean, I like Gurley. I think Gurley's going to win a lot of people fantasy, and I don't know about an auction. I think in a lot of snake drafts for sure, because you can probably get him at a decent area ADP, whatever you want to call it, which makes it a good call to get him. In auctions, I have a feeling, we see it a lot with rookies too. They get overvalued, especially someone with as much hype as him. A lot of people are going to think, well, man, he's going to be sweet. I want him for the second half of my season. And yeah, he might be awesome then. I think there's a good chance that we'll see flashes that are going to be like, wow, just amazed. But it's just a matter of when that is. So you got to be careful how much you pay. I don't like the fact that he's not going to play in any preseason. To me, that makes me want to avoid him. I'd like to see him shake some rust and get some reps in the preseason against live competition, because then it gets him back in the field quicker during the season. Who knows how many games it takes then during this season for him to, gain some kind of foothold on this backfield, and maybe it never happens. And that's what worries me the most about spending $25 or something like that on him and that happening. But and then, Melvin Gordon, you talked about it. Or I think that he loses touches to Woodhead. I didn't like what I saw from him in week 1. Not to say he's going to be a bad back, but as a rookie, I think it can limit how much usage he gets. I thought I read somewhere, he's been having problems in pass protection. Well,
that's no good.
You got this new old quarterback back there. I don't think that doesn't really bode well for heavy usage anyway. And then to me, there's Abdullah, and I like him. To me, you either like him or you hate him. So a lot of people think, there's no way he's a 3-down back. He's just a PPR guy. Some people swear that he's going to be. Doesn't matter. I think that you probably are never going to own him in your league unless you really, really love him, because the buzz is so big. He's one of these guys that's just going to get priced out of his actual
value.
Yeah. Based on, because I mean, really, I think by the end of the year, I think it's going to be pretty tight between him and Joik in terms of overall fantasy production come the end of the year. I don't think one guy's going to run away with it. Since we're talking about Abdullah, I don't think Abdullah's going to run away with it unless Joik, gets hurt and doesn't play for 3/4 of the season or half the season, which could happen. But I'm not willing to bank on that just yet and go out and make sure that I get Amir Abdullah. So just be careful. Don't fall into the buzz and the bidding wars that could happen.
I can just imagine where he's at if you were drafting, last night or whatever the case may be, or tonight, I guess, right? Would have just been.
Yeah, for sure. For
paying
sure.
$28 from him or something.
One guy catches one pass and he's the second coming, and one guy fumbles one pass and he's the biggest pile of shit that the NFL's seen. Like, it just, it's week 1 of the preseason. Like, who cares? Like, these games mean nothing in the grand scheme of things, and people just, thank you, social media. It's just made it that much more entertaining.
Yeah, that's right.
But
all right, so there's a running back episode into the hour and a half mark plus. It's good stuff. It's always the number one download that we've had in the 3 years of the podcast. And it's because it's such a volatile thing, especially in auction. Like, how much money do you spend and who's the guy you spend on? And it's always that tricky thing. And what I like is, again, this year you're seeing that 0 RB, and then you're like, well, maybe it's not 0 RB. So many guys are, I'm not spending money on running backs this year, and then you spend money on running backs.
Wow, it is true. I mean, it looks good on paper, and then it's like trying to break up with your girlfriend in high school or something. You think, oh man, I can't stand this. She just drives me crazy, and then you get face to face with her, and you just chicken out, and you can't actually go through with it, right?
Yeah,
because you think, oh my God, what's it going to be like without her? What's my team going to look like if I have Trey Mason and Doug Martin as my starting running backs going into week 1? Oh my God. You just freak out and have a little panic attack and get your pants and go back to what? Yeah, exactly. And it's just easier just to go with what I know. Yeah,
that's right. Now, write her a note and give it to her friend in the hallway, and then hope you never have to see her again. It's the only way you can do it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that is an easier way, that's for sure.
And now I guess the kids just.
I was gonna say there were cell phones when we were in school. Oh my God, they just Snapchat, and then the message goes away right away, and they don't have to worry about it again. Yeah, well, they got it easy.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no kidding, because they don't even face to face anymore. They don't even have to. Wow. I mean, I was going to say sex is a whole different thing now with the cell phone, but that's
okay.
Sorry. I'm sorry. I got to stop right now. Anyways, hopefully next week all 3 of us are around. I am going to be in the literal center of Canada all next week, but I'm sure I can still pod on the regular Tuesday night, because I'm sure I'll get the beers in Sunday night and Monday night, and then Tuesday I can lock myself up. The kids got a goalie camp next week, so we got to venture and go visit the Golden Boy.
Right on.
Anyways, and so hopefully Mr. Blister will be back, and we'll actually have all 3 of us back at her. Next week is quarterbacks and tight ends, I believe, and everybody's getting a little bit closer to their drafts, and hopefully guys are not drafting for another couple weeks here until they can see the full extent of the preseason, because you don't want to be that guy doing the Abdullah train. You're walking in doing the locomotion. I was at a wedding. I'm sorry. Train locomotion. Yeah.
No,
nothing. Kylie Minogue. I'm not going to wait until if I edit this and at the end I play Kylie Minogue, I could get shot. I think I did see a good, someone sent me a meme speaking of weddings. Healy sent me a meme of what's the dude's name again? That was the golf pro in Happy Gilmore. I know it's Apollo Creed.
Oh, yeah, I can't remember his name. Yeah, Guy with one arm.
Yeah. So the meme was that it was JPP signing a contract or something, and he had the wooden hand. I thought it was pretty good.
I think I did see that too.
Yeah, it was pretty good. Anyways, on that note, with this podcast gone south pretty quick, we talked about Snapchat and JPP. So, and the locomotion. So it went south really quick. Hopefully Blister shut it off before an hour. He's going to be angry with us come
I'm getting angry with us right now.
Nobody listens this long anyways. We know that. I'd have way more comments about Slim Whitman if people listen this long. Because we get negative comments about all the not a lot of, but we get some about like we said, the morning zoo, but no one's ever asked about the Slim Whitman at the end. And that means they've shut off the podcast by this point. So I'm just going to call that this is unprofessional, isn't it? Is that what's happening right now?
I'm texting right now, so I'm
texting your brother. How's his team looking?
He just sent me a pic. That's what I'm responding to. Yeah.
Okay, so come on, let's go. Let's critique it live. Let's go.
Okay, just a sec here. I'm just sending this
because no one's listening anyways, so he won't.
This is getting edited out, right?
Sure.
Well,
I didn't say springtime in the. I didn't say springtime in.
Well, you can splice.
Okay.
So let's see. Natty Ice for 6.
Okay.
Jeremy Hill 33. Latavius Murray 20. Julio 52. Jordan Matthews 20. Allen Robinson 16. Jarvis Landry for 15. Charles Johnson 5. Kendall Wright 3. Pierre Garçon 3.
I like it.
Solid.
I like the starting lineup anyways.
Yeah, starters are sweet. Yep. He needs some RBs now, but I mean, I don't mind putting Latavius as an RB2.
I don't mind. He spent what, $52 or something on running backs?
$53 on his top 2.
That's all right. And I don't mind that. I think he got Jeremy Hill at good value there.
Well, it's like you said, he was like kind of went against whatever he was planning, but he said it was too cheap not to.
That's a good 1-2 punch, especially if Latavius Murray does what you hope he does.
Yeah, I think so.
It's pretty good. All right. Well, there you go. That's a good. See how we just came full circle on that? We talked about Jeremy Hill at the front end, and then we ended him at the back end. There it is. All right. So, well done. Anyways, I'm just going to call it before I get myself any deeper in the slough that's been the back of this podcast. So I'll see you when it's springtime in the Rockies.